All right, three-phase homeowners, listen up. Ever dreamt of having a Tesla Powerwall 3 gracing your wall, but wondered, can my system even handle that? You are so not alone. We're diving deep into a recent Tesla blog post that's got everyone talking all about Powerwall 3 on a three-phase home system.
What's fascinating is there's been so much head-scratching over this, and Tesla themselves have even admitted that their previous communication wasn't exactly clear.
Right.
But this new article lays it all out.
So no more guessing games. Hit us with the headline. Can a Powerwall 3 actually work with my three-phase setup?
It absolutely can. And here's the kicker. Even though the Powerwall 3 itself is a single-phase unit, it can still offset your energy bills across all three phases.
Really?
Yeah, that's right. We're talking potential savings across the board.
Hold on, rewind that for me. How can a single-phase unit pull off that kind of magic trick?
It's all about this clever little thing called net metering.
Okay.
Think of it like this. Imagine you've got 3 bank accounts, one for each phase. The Powerwall 3 can only directly deposit in one account at a time, right?
Right. Makes sense so far.
But here's the thing. It can see the balance in all 3 accounts.
Okay.
So let's say one account is running low because you've got a power-hungry appliance going to town. The Powerwall 3 swoops in, deposits enough energy into its designated account to offset that usage, and boom, your overall balance across all 3 accounts stays in the green. Pretty neat, huh?
Okay, that's a seriously smooth move, Powerwall 3. But let's talk backup power during an outage, because that's what we're all really curious about. Does this whole net metering wizardry still apply when the grid goes down?
So here's where things get a little more nuanced. While the Powerwall 3 can keep an eye on your energy use across all the phases, it can only output that backup power to one phase at a time during an outage.
Okay, so there's a catch. How much of a deal breaker is this? Should I be worried?
I think it depends. The article breaks down like 8 different ways to configure your Powerwall 3 on a 3-phase system, each with its pros and cons. And the best option for you really boils down to your specific needs and what you already have in place.
Okay, so no one-size-fits-all solution. Makes sense. Let's say I'm starting fresh, no solar panels yet, but I'm ready to go all in on clean energy. What's the ideal Powerwall 3 setup in that scenario?
In that case, the article recommends a pretty straightforward setup. You're going to connect both your Powerwall 3 and your shiny new solar panels to one of your 3 phases. This lets the Powerwall 3 tap into the full potential of your solar array. We're talking up to 20 kilowatts of solar goodness.
20 kilowatts? That's enough to power a small village, right? Maybe not a village, but definitely enough for my energy needs. But let's be clear, even though the backup power is limited to one phase during an outage, my lights will still be on across the entire house, right?
That's right. The trick is to be strategic about which appliances and circuits are connected to that backed up phase. Think essentials. Fridge, a few key lights, maybe the Wi-Fi router so you don't go into social media withdrawal.
No more marathon gaming sessions during a blackout. Now that's a sacrifice.
Well, unless you want to get really creative with your wiring, that might be the case.
Fair enough. But it sounds like for folks starting fresh, going solar and Powerwall 3 in one fell swoop is a pretty sweet deal.
Absolutely. But let's not forget those who've already jumped on the solar bandwagon. If you already got solar panels soaking up the sun, things get even more interesting.
Intriguing. So for our solar veterans out there, how does the Powerwall 3 play with an existing setup? Does it get along with all the other equipment?
It can. But there are some things to consider. One of the most surprising takeaways from the article is that, depending on your current inverter, you might actually be able to ditch it entirely when you install the Powerwall 3.
Wait, ditch the old inverter, as in, say, sayonara, to a perfectly functional piece of equipment. Is that even allowed?
It can be. And get this, in some areas, it might actually be necessary. The article points out that some regions have new grid connection rules that your old inverter might not comply with.
Okay, now that's an aha moment for sure. Who knew grid regulations could be so traumatic? But tell me more about this ditching the inverter business. What's the upside?
Well, for starters, less clutter. No more clunky inverter taking up space. Plus, the Powerwall 3's built-in inverter comes with a shiny new 10-year warranty.
Oh, nice.
And for the data nerds out there, you'll get even better monitoring and control of your entire system through the Tesla app. It's all about streamlining and simplifying.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal here, but let's say my solar setup is a bit more robust. I'm talking a full-blown 3-phase inverter humming along like a well-oiled machine. What are my options in that scenario?
Good question. The article outlines a couple of possibilities for our three-phase inverter veterans. One option is to keep your existing three-phase inverter as is and essentially treat the Powerwall 3 as a standalone battery system.
So my trusty three-phase inverter would keep the solar party going and the Powerwall 3 would just charge up from the grid or any excess solar.
Exactly. The only caveat here is that your solar panels wouldn't actually contribute during a grid outage. That's because without all three phases up and running, your three-phase inverter is essentially benched.
Ah, I see. So backup power, yes, but maybe not as much off-the-grid independence as some folks might be hoping for.
You got it. Now there's another option, which is to connect some or even all of your existing solar panels directly to the Powerwall 3. But there's a catch.
Let me guess. It's not as simple as just plugging things in willy-nilly.
You know it. This option depends on a few factors, like the age and design of your solar panels. And the article mentions some potential voltage issues that could arise if you're exporting a lot of solar power through a single phase.
Voltage issues. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Sure. Think of it like this. Your home's electrical system is like a network of pipes. When you try to push too much electricity or water in this analogy through a pipe that's not designed for it, you can run into problems. It's like trying to cram all your clothes into a suitcase that's too small. Something's got to give.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not always as simple as out with the old, in with the new when it comes to inverters. There's some careful consideration involved.
Exactly. And speaking of careful consideration, the article highlights some specific quirks for installations in Western Australia. Apparently they like to do things a bit differently over there.
Western Australia. What's got Western Australia causing a stir in the world of Powerwall 3?
Well, it seems our friends down under have this 5 kilowatt per phase limit on solar exports.
Okay.
And the article did not hold back, calling it a silly idea.
Silly idea. Those are fighting words. What's so silly about it?
Okay, so think of it this way. The Powerwall 3 is like a muscle car, capable of delivering some serious power when you need it most. But this 5 kilowatt limit is like putting a governor on that engine. You're not unleashing its full potential. It's especially noticeable in WA, where they get some serious sunshine.
So folks in WA are stuck with a partially caffeinated muscle car. That doesn't seem quite fair.
You're not wrong. And the article did mention that Tesla is working with regulators in WA to try and change this limit. They're basically saying, let the Powerwall 3 OR.
Good for them. But in the meantime, I guess it's extra important for our WA listeners to crunch the numbers and make sure their energy needs align with these local regulations.
Absolutely. And for anyone, really regardless of location, it's crucial to think about how you'll actually use your Powerwall 3 during an outage. Do you absolutely need all three phases powered up? Or can you get by with strategically backing up your essential circuits?
Strategic backup planning. Got it. That's like a game of energy chess. Now, before we move on from configurations, the article also mentioned microinverters, which I know are becoming increasingly popular. Can you give us a quick refresher on those?
Of course. Think of microinverters as the more decentralized, democratic cousin of traditional inverters. Instead of having one central inverter calling the shots, each individual solar panel gets its own mini inverter. It's like giving each panel a little brain of its own.
Sounds high-tech. But what's the advantage of going down the microinverter route?
For one, it can boost efficiency. With a traditional inverter, if one panel is shaded or having a bad day, it can drag down the performance of the whole system. But with microinverters, each panel operates independently, so any underperforming panels don't affect the rest.
Okay, that makes sense. So each panel is free to soak up the sun to its fullest potential, no matter what its neighbor is doing. But how does the Powerwall 3 handle these independent microinverter setups?
In a nutshell, only the microinverters connected to the same phase as your Powerwall 3 would contribute during a grid outage. So you're still working with that single-phase backup power, even if you've got solar panels spread across all three phases.
Gotcha. So the name of the game is still strategic planning, even with the fancy microinverters. But hey, at least I can impress my friends by saying microinverter with a straight face now. That's gotta count for something, right?
I'll count it as a win.
Yeah.
But speaking of wins, let's move beyond backup power for a moment and talk about another big perk of the Powerwall 3, solar self-consumption.
Ah, yes. Using your own homegrown solar energy instead of feeding it back to the grid. Isn't that where the real magic happens?
Exactly. And this is where the Powerwall 3 really shines. Remember how we talked about ditching your old inverter? Well, the article points out that for brand new solar plus battery installations, you might not even need a separate solar inverter at all. The Powerwall 3 can handle it all.
No way. So I can kiss goodbye to inverter clutter and streamline my entire setup. That's amazing. But let's talk practicality here. Can the Powerwall 3's built-in inverter really hold its own against a dedicated solar inverter?
From what the article says, it seems like it can. Tesla claims it can handle complex roofs and shading with ease, and it boasts a seriously impressive solar-to-home efficiency of 97.5%.
97.5%, that's like almost every drop of sunshine making its way into my house. Okay, I'm sold on the efficiency front, but what about the financial side of things? All this cutting-edge tech has got to come with a hefty price tag, right?
You're not wrong. The article mentioned that a Powerwall 3, including the Gateway 2, will set you back around $13,600 AUD.
Okay, that's a significant investment, to say the least. Not exactly pocket change.
It's definitely a commitment. But there is some good news on the horizon. Tesla is planning to release more affordable expansion units in early 2025. These units essentially let you scale up your Powerwall 3 system without needing to buy a whole new unit.
Okay, so you can start with one Powerwall 3 and grow your system over time. That makes it a bit more accessible, especially for those of us who aren't made of money.
Exactly. It's a smart strategy for folks who are future-proofing their homes and want the flexibility to adapt as their energy needs evolve. But what about those who need a robust three-phase backup solution right now?
Right, not everyone wants to wait for the future, especially when it comes to something as crucial as power. Are there other options out there for them?
Absolutely. The article briefly mentioned that companies like Furnius, SunGrow, and a few others offer three-phase battery systems specifically designed for a full three-phase backup. So it's not a Tesla or bust situation.
Okay, good to know. Choice is always a good thing. But before we wrap things up, I wanted to circle back to something that really piqued my curiosity in the article. It mentioned that Tesla is working on something called a grid-forming inverter. What in the world is that?
That's a great question. And honestly, it's a bit of a sneak peek into the future of home energy. Imagine a world where your Powerwall 3 doesn't just provide backup power, but can actually form its own mini-grid, potentially disconnecting you from the main grid entirely.
Whoa, hold on. My Powerwall 3, a mini-grid mastermind. That sounds seriously next level. How does that even work?
Think of it this way. Right now, your home's electrical system relies on the grid for stability and to keep everything humming along at the right frequency and voltage.
Okay, so the grid's like the conductor of an orchestra, making sure everything's in sync.
Exactly. But with a grid-forming inverter, your Powerwall 3 could potentially take on that conductor role, creating its own little energy island right in your home.
So in a grid outage, instead of just keeping the lights on, my Powerwall 3 could essentially become its own mini power plant.
That's the idea. It's like having your own personal energy fortress ready to weather any storm.
Okay, that is seriously impressive. Talk about taking control of your energy destiny. Okay, my mind is officially blown. My own personal energy fortress. That's straight out of a sci-fi novel. It sounds like Tesla's really pushing the boundaries of what's possible with home energy.
Absolutely. And the best part is you don't even have to wait for this grid-forming future to start reaping the benefits of the Powerwall 3. Even with today's tech, it can significantly boost your solar self-consumption, and slash those energy bills.
Right. Let's not get so caught up in the future that we forget about the present. So for those of us eager to start shrinking our energy bills today, what's the key takeaway when it comes to the Powerwall 3 and self-consumption?
It's all about, maximizing the amount of solar energy you're actually using directly in your home. Think of it like this. Every watt of solar power that you use yourself is a watt that you're not paying for from the grid.
Makes sense. And with energy prices doing their best impression of a rocket ship these days, every watt counts.
Exactly. And the Powerwall 3 acts like a smart energy manager, storing up that excess solar power during the day and then seamlessly releasing it when you need it most, like during those peak evening hours when those grid prices are at their highest.
So it's like having a secret stash of sunshine to power those movie nights and late night snack fests. I can get behind that. But let's talk numbers for a moment. We've established that a Powerwall 3 is a significant investment. What kind of payback period are we looking at here? Is it actually worth it from a financial standpoint?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And unfortunately, there's no, one-size-fits-all answer. The payback period will really depend on a bunch of factors, like your energy consumption habits, what your local electricity rates are, and how much sunshine your solar panels are actually soaking up.
Okay, so a lot of variables in the mix. But let's say, for argument's sake, that I'm a relatively, energy-conscious homeowner with a decent-sized solar system. What's a realistic time frame for actually recouping my investment in a Powerwall 3?
It's really tough to say for sure without crunching the numbers for your specific scenario, but based on average energy usage and current electricity rates, it's reasonable to expect a payback period of somewhere between 5 to 10 years.
Okay, not exactly an impulse purchase, but not an eternity either. And I imagine that factors in those more affordable expansion units coming out next year, right?
Exactly. If you decide to scale up your storage capacity down the road, those expansion units will definitely factor into the overall cost effectiveness of your system. And keep in mind, that payback period really only tells part of the story.
What else should we be considering?
Well, there's also the intangible value of energy independence and resilience. Knowing that you've got that reliable source of backup power during a grid outage, that peace of mind is, priceless for some people.
So true. Especially with those extreme weather events becoming more frequent these days, having that energy security is becoming increasingly important. Well said. This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. But before we sign off, I always like to leave our listeners with a little something to ponder. Any final thoughts or provocative questions for our audience today?
Absolutely. We've talked a lot about, the here and now of the Powerwall 3, but I think the real excitement lies in what it represents for the future of energy. As we move towards a more decentralized, renewable-powered grid, technologies like the Powerwall 3 and those grid-forming inverters we discussed, they'll play a crucial role. So here's my question for our listeners. What role do you envision yourself playing in this energy revolution? Will you be a passive consumer, or will you take control of your energy destiny and become a prosumer, generating and managing your own power? It's an exciting time to be alive, folks, and the future of energy is in our hands.
Beautifully said. A future powered by sunshine and innovation. Sign me up.
Thanks for joining us for this electrifying deep dive into the world of the Tesla Powerwall 3. And remember, knowledge is power, so keep those brains charged up and stay curious, everyone.